So I just read over your form real quick. It seems you have a very smart dog, but leash reactivity.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So go ahead and fill me in a bit more.
So yeah, so she understands heel and all of that, and she's fine to walk on a leash other than she sees a car or a dog, a truck, or sometimes people.
Or a bird.
Or a bird, right? Anything distracting. But with cars and trucks in particular, and other dogs, she just lunges and barks uncontrollably.
Mm-hmm.
And she'll do the same sometimes when we are walking. We're in West Virginia right now. So if we're walking on a path and she sees a deer or deer tracks or smells wildlife,
Then we have
She'll go
no, then we have no, like she won't heel or
she won't do
she
anything.
just, she has to, find chase the tracks.
Right. What do you walk her at currently?
So we have a regular 6-foot leash
Mm-hmm.
and a harness,
Okay.
generally speaking.
Is it a front clip or a back clip?
Back clip, back top.
Okay. Harnesses promote reactivity, correct?
No.
I am
Okay.
so not surprised. I feel like she got more like that after we got to the harness.
Yeah. So I understand why people use them, especially for puppies. It's because they're trying to avoid pressure on the trachea.
Mm-hmm.
But harnesses are meant for pulling. Huskies use harnesses to pull sleds. Horses wear harnesses to pull carriages. But when they steer the horse, they don't control the horse on a harness. They control the horse with the bridle. So if you control the head, you control the body.
Great.
They have a similar tool for dogs. It's called a gentle leader. Wraps around the muzzle, has a little strap, and you clip your leash to it. So you have immediate control over the head.
Wow.
Yeah. Now that tool, it's better than the harness, but you would still experience, reactivity. And I'll explain that in a little bit. The harnesses, what happens is, one, it gives you the least amount of control because when she starts to pull, the pressure goes on the front of the chest, and that's where the bulk of a dog's power is, because they push forward with their back legs and pull forward with their front legs. And then it also creates what is known as opposition reflex. Are you familiar with that?
No.
So opposition reflex is just a fancy word for when a dog feels pressure, they want to go against it. Okay. So if you pull back, she pulls more forward. If you pull right, she pulls left. You pull left, she pulls right. Okay.
Yeah.
So their instinct is to go opposite.
Mm-hmm.
So when you put that on the chest, it creates what we call agitation or frustration. So very common where people get a puppy. It's a very friendly puppy that wants to say hi to everybody. They put on a harness because, of course, they don't want to put pressure on the trachea. And then every time that puppy sees a dog, they'll pull back on the harness because they don't want their puppy jumping all over the dog, right? And what happens is, over time, that pulling back and that opposition reflex creates frustration because the puppy now cannot get to the dog that it wants to say hi to, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that becomes barking. And usually in the beginning, it's friendly barking, right? It's like, oh, I want to play.
Right.
So but frustration then turns into agitation, which then over time can turn into aggression. So a lot of people unintentionally make their puppies aggressive over the course of the first year of their life because of the harness.
Very interesting.
So in protection training, and you can go on YouTube and look up protection dog being trained or whatever. In the very early stages, when we're developing aggression or aggressive responses, you put a harness on them. And what happens is you have the person holding the dog back, okay, on a harness. And you have another person who's agitating the dog, making them suspicious, starting to lunge and bark. And then we praise that, and then we pull back more because we want to create more frustration because now the dog cannot get to the person.
Wow.
We build that to controlled aggression. Okay. So it's super common. Almost anytime I ask anybody, do you know harnesses promote reactivity or aggressive responses? Like, nobody really knows that.
Yeah, I never would have.
Thank you so much. There's some other conditions that we will eventually tell you about that I think promoted her aggression. Like we stopped for about 4 hours a day, going to a group of dogs that run around together. So we were studying and we learned that might have also promoted it.
Her reactivity?
Yeah.
Yeah. So is she off leash social?
Off leash use social, yes.
So, you know, and this is not uncommon, where on leash the dog can be what looks like aggressive, right? But it's really either frustration. And what happens is, let's say it's a friend of hers. Okay, this is just an example. And she's on the harness and she were to become reactive. And that reactivity is coming from frustration of, I can't get to my friend, right? And
Yeah.
then as that dog approaches, if enough frustration builds on the approach, it has to go somewhere. And that becomes a bite. Okay.
Wow.
So then people think, oh, my dog's aggressive. And I go, no. I'm like, because off leash, your dog would have been fine. It's
It
because
sounds like her.
as it was approaching, the frustration built so much, it has to go somewhere. And dogs express emotions through the mouths, licking, chewing, nipping, barking, biting, salivating, panting. You know, they're very mouth based whenever they're expressing anything. And when frustration is usually expressed through nipping or biting. You know, so that's why, like, if you ignore a puppy when they're small, at some point they start nipping at you, right? Because they want attention, they want interaction, and if they can't get it from you, they start to nip to release that frustration. So it doesn't mean that the dog's aggressive. It just means on leash, you know, if there's frustration involved or if it's not done correctly, it can escalate. But then as you take the leash off, and then like a lot of times they're fine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, although she would run away if we took the leash off. I mean, maybe she'd come
yeah.
back.
And she would come back. I mean, she's done that before,
But she has run
run
away
away.
enough times that we don't let her off leash anymore.
And run away, like in terms of like chasing something or just in
Well, we
front?
hike in the forest, like we're right near the forest here.
Mhm.
So her walks are always on a hiking trail, and she'll run away into the forest.
Gotcha.
And then she'll come back. I mean, at least she's always come back. You know, maybe one day she wouldn't, but
Okay. Anything else about her that I should know about?
Oh yeah. What?
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So this breed, I don't know if you've worked with the Norwegian Bluehund or if you peeked at it. So they're herding dogs, and they're supposedly supposed to have pretty several hours of intense exercise and a lot of training, or if they're not regularly trained and given new challenges, they get easily frustrated and they'll tear things up. So they also bark, like their natural behavior is to bark a lot, and so they need to have the barking trained out of them, and we didn't know that, and we didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So she needs to have the barking trained out of her.
Mm-hmm.
So she'll just, like, if left to her own devices, she'll start barking, even in the house or outside. She'll tear up whatever she can in terms of cardboard boxes. She's not bad. Like, if she knows she's not supposed to tear up the sofa, so she'll look for a box to tear up.
Sure.
But we'd like her not to feel the need to tear things up.
Okay.
And then she will like very kind of demandingly bark and tell us that she wants food or she wants to go out. And we thought that that's a bad sign, that we're supposed to reverse that, so that she waits for us to tell her it's time to do something. So she also won't crate train. So we're trying to be nice and have something like her food is in her crate, her treat is in her crate is in the room with us. But she only goes in for whatever the thing is, but she won't stay in there. So we haven't left her alone yet. And she's 9 months old.
Sure.
So we want her crate trained.
Yeah, and all that stuff. The only time I ever put things on a breed is, like, for instance, if you said, like, you know, she's a herding dog.
She's a herding dog, yeah.
But all that other stuff, any breed of dog does that. You know.
I thought it gave us the impression that she needs requires a lot of physical, like, she's a dog where they recommend that if you're gonna go running with them every day, or if you're gonna go on camping trips or long hikes, that's a good dog for it. That's kind of why we like her.
Sure. And did you get her from a breeder?
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you get her from a breeder that bred working dogs
Um,
or family pet?
so, yeah. I mean, there were working dogs, so breeder farm. You had dogs that were working dogs. but I don't think that the Norwegian Boons, I think they do 2 or 3 types of dogs.
Mhm.
I didn't get the impression, I don't know, that they, were training working dogs.
They weren't training them there, but Norwegian Boohoons do work as police dogs and service dogs.
Mm.
That's a common thing to do with this breed.
So it's like, so my stepdad has border collies,
Mm-hmm.
and his are working border collies. Like he herds sheep with them. He does competition with them. He goes to Wisconsin and works in a circle pen and works out in the field and like does stuff with them. But you can also get, border collie that's a family pet. So it just depends on what the breeder is breeding for. And even like if they are breeding for family pet, like there's still the chance of like you could get like a dog that has the instinct. So for example, I had a client who had a Samoyed, and I don't know if you're aware, but Samoyeds are herding dogs or were herding dogs. And she got one that was family pet. And then one day when she was playing fetch with him, he, instead of going straight for the ball, he circled around the ball and picked it up from behind. And that was something that I had learned was a herding instinct, is they go around and from behind. So when I pointed that out to her, I was like, hey, I think this guy might have some herding instinct. And I put her in touch with my stepdad, and he took her to Wisconsin. And sure enough, the dog had some instinct to herd dogs, but the breeder was breeding family pet, but she just happened to get a dog that had some instinct to him.
Well, a lot of the Norwegian Boohoons are used for, a lot of people have them do agility competitions,
Mhm.
and that's something they're really good at.
Mhm.
We're interested in that in the future because we want to keep her busy and satisfied.
Related, yeah. So,
But in terms of herding behavior, the only thing that we've seen that could be herding behavior, I don't know, is, sometimes when you walk with her, she'll like nip, at your pants or your shoes.
You are so under exaggerating it. She will constantly pull at your pants in a very annoying way, even though she's 9 months old.
now, aside from the behavior stuff, okay, because this is very important, what are you realistically going to do with your dog? Like, are you for sure going to do agility? Are you for sure going to see, can the dog herd, or, do some other form of work? Because if you have a dog that has working drive, for me to come in and then correct the dog for its genetics
Great question.
would not be good, right?
Right.
Is because let's say there is some herding instinct there, okay, and we correct that and we stop it, which we can. It's one, either going to be a problem because now the dog doesn't have an outlet, or two, if you then try to go into herding, well, now we've just deterred the dog from performing the behavior.
Oh, poor thing.
Yeah.
My impression is that we intended her to be a family dog with our active outdoor life in the mountains, although we live most of the time in Chicago, so it's half and half, West Virginia, Chicago. So we are interested, because of what we understood, what we thought we understood about her breed, we are interested in having her do agility, not necessarily competitively, because we don't want to devote a lot of time to it, but we have enough space in our apartment that we can have an agility set. So we're interested in having her do agility. I don't foresee the possibility of her being a working dog or a herding dog. Is that sounding right?
Yeah, right. And the agility is really, particularly, being in Chicago, bad weather, all that kind of stuff, when we don't want to go out, right, to give her an outlet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fun, right? It's fun to train a dog to do, jumps or whatever, but it's nothing serious, right? Nothing
Right.
bad.
So just, keep in mind, like I can help with a lot of stuff. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I'll point out to you, or we'll point out to you, like, hey, like you actually just happen to have a dog that needs more. Okay. It happens. Like I had a client actually last year. He got a black German Shepherd, and same thing. Like he got his German Shepherd from a breeder. It was a family pet breeder, and his German Shepherd was very drivey. Like he like it looked like he had ADD, but really he needed work. He needed something to do.
That's our dog.
When we started training him, when the guy came back, I was like, hey, like, you know, I thought it was this, but this is this, right? And your dog is this. And this is what your dog needs. So if you fulfill this for your dog, then you're going to get this in response, which is what he wanted, right? Because he wanted control over his dog. He didn't want his dog to be destructive, not reactive to, you know, dogs on leash and all that stuff. And I was like, I get this part, right? This is easy, but unfortunately for him, his dog had an extra step, right? And I told him, we can't take that out the dog, right? So once working with your pup, it'll give a better idea. And I'll give you answers, like, you know, like if you have a treadmill, like treadmilling the dog with like with a backpack on or whatever is a form of work. You know, there just has to be an outlet. Okay.
Really?
Yeah, it's we train treadmill dogs with treadmill all the time at my space.
So that description sounds exactly like our dog.
Gotcha. Okay.
So you'll decide if that's
I'll
true,
let you
but
know.
Yeah.
I'll let you, because it's pretty straightforward. Like if it's just the average dog with frustration issues and overstimulation issues and stuff, it's pretty straightforward. Once we start to get in discipline and formal obedience and all that stuff, they tend to like just tone down. But in other cases, you'll be doing all that stuff, but you're like, man, like it's just never enough. And I'm like, it's because you have a dog with drive.
Well,
Okay.
Rick has had a lot of dogs, and this one is totally
Yeah,
different.
right. Yeah, I've had a lot of dogs. This is definitely the most active dog that I've had.
So
Sure.
we'll hike. I would say if we were to take on a 4-hour hike, a really kind of hard hike in up and down, then she'll be fine and she'll be happy with that and she'll sleep.
Yeah.
No.
But then you also want to think about what you're willing to commit to
Yeah.
for years.
Yeah, right.
Right.
And,
Because I was
you know, I'd love a 4-hour hike, but
I would definitely
doing one every day is not practical.
I would definitely get the treadmill. It just sounds like sort of cruel, but if that's something that will make her satisfied, put her on the treadmill. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, we have a dog actually. I forgot what the breed is. It's a herding dog as well. Comes to our daycare facility. Her name's Kiwi, and she does like 2 hours of treadmill on 4 miles an hour every time she comes over. Okay, because anything less than that, she is just she's just off the walls.
But isn't that training her to feel that she has a right to that much exercise?
Well, she doesn't do it every day, right? He only brings her like, let's say once a week or something like that. But also when you structure things, and that's a very good question, is when you structure and control things, it's different than as like just going and like just letting the dog do whatever for however long it wants, right?
Right.
Because there's still rules and boundaries to it.
Do you have to be in the room when she's on the do we have to put that treadmill in a room that we're in?
Yeah, so for us, we're always present. I recommend, you know, it's where you are going to either be present or nearby, so that you're, you know, you can hear. You know, but that's just another option. Or like every time you walk her, just pop up a doggy backpack, you know, because that also amplifies the level of work that she's doing.
Sure.
I love it.
They're all just like ideas. These are like simple ideas. I don't know. I'd have to like see the dog, do a few classes, and that gives me a lot more of a perspective.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions before I start moving on to the next thing?
No, that's good.
So I'm assuming before scheduling this, you did some research on us and how we train, the methods we use. Correct? Okay. So we use e-collar and prong collar. Primarily, actually, just e-collar. If I use prong collar, it's in conjunction with an e-collar. But we do almost everything just strictly through remote. So any puppy or dog trained by us that is older than 6 months is going to be on a remote. Okay. And the reason why I just use this tool is because right off the bat, it gives me off leash control. Okay. So, and that's, you know, everything can be built to an off leash level. It just depends on whether the owner wants it to that degree. Okay. So in your particular case, there's, you know, what you're wanting and needing, and then there's what the dog needs, and then there's what I think you need, right? So I'll kind of give you the options and how it would work out, and then you just kind of decide what you would want to do with your own dog. Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
So the reactivity and the leash walking and the recall, if that was just your primary concern, you're like in the 6 class range. Okay, which is a 6-week program, 1 day a week for an hour. The first thing we teach is always the heel command, which is the walking at our side. And I know, she has the command, but the difference is currently it's not applicable in situations where there's going to be stimuli, right?
Good question.
Yeah.
See, I'm so sorry. There's certain limitations to the kind of class we can take. Can
Okay.
I let you know what they are so that
Yeah.
you don't have to tell us about them? So our situation is a little different because we're coming to Chicago, but we have no apartment for her to live in Chicago.
Oh,
So
sure.
we can only do a board and train with you.
Oh, that's
The
fine.
question is how long?
Sure. Okay. That's good to know. So if you're looking for reactivity, so board and train is actually a little bit different because we cover, so let's say, think of 1 week at my facility as 3 weeks of your time.
Okay.
So the 6-week equivalent would be the 2-week board and train. However,
Okay.
we cover all the commands.
Great.
Okay?
What
So,
are all the commands?
so there's 6 formal and functional obedience commands: sit, stay, down, come, place, and heel. The last one being break, which means the release command, your job is done. But there's 6 commands that are meant to allow you to live your life with your dog.
Mhm.
Okay. So in a 2-week program, we do cover all 6 of those commands. It's simply how far can we push it? Okay.
Mhm.
Now, 5 of the commands, the 5 of them excluding recall, are very simple to transfer over. Meaning, once we train the dog and we give them back to you, how easily does it transfer from us to you? Okay.
Mhm.
5 of them are super simple. The recall always takes the longest.
Is that when you say come and it comes back to you?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
So you will still have some degree of work to do. It's just the longer we have her, the less you have to do. Okay.
Ah, interesting.
So think of the 2-week is kind of like 50, 60% off leash trained. Okay. You still have to close that 40 to 50% gap. But
Okay.
the recall is the one that's always the most difficult because it's about practicing out at the park,
Mhm.
at the forest preserve, at the
Mm.
dog park, in the yard. You have to work in a number of different environments, and
Mhm.
it's usually months of at least 2 to 3 months. And this is if you're doing it every day of practicing before it's what I would call 100% reliable.
Hmm.
Okay. The reason why I say it's fast to teach, but the reason why it takes longer is if you drill recall too much, your dog will not leave. They'll just glue to you. Okay.
Wow.
And we're trying to get a balance of the dog is free roaming, playing and
Huh.
running around, chasing squirrels, chasing rabbits, and I can call them back. And when I release them, they'll go back at it again. But if we
Huh.
do too much in a short period of time, they won't leave. They'll just stay right next to you because they think every time you gotta
Fascinating.
leave, you call me back. Okay.
Fascinating. Hmm.
So it takes longer because you have to build the comfort of them being able to, go off and do their thing. But then when you call them, they come back, but they get to go right back to it if you decided to. Okay.
Mm.
Plus, you have to like when I think 100% reliable, I mean like even in emergency situations. Okay, even when like the most common one is like a firework. Dogs tend to be scared of fireworks, and sometimes someone will like randomly blow one up in the city at a park or something,
Mhm.
and then dogs get scared, right? And their first instinct is almost always run away. So, and I want to have control even in that kind of setting.
Okay.
Okay.
Yay.
So the more you practice, the closer you get to that as close to 100% reliability as possible.
Okay.
So that one takes longer to teach. We could teach it real quick. She'll know it. She'll have the foundation of it, but then you have to go out and replicate it, right?
Mhm.
Because we can only do so much. Like we take dogs
Okay.
to Horner Park, which is a park nearby here in the
Which
city.
one?
Horner.
Okay.
Yeah, it's over on Irving. It's like northwest of us on
Yep.
California, I think in Irving. It's a
Mhm.
really big park, really nice. A lot of people take their dogs there and stuff. But Horner Park wouldn't be like the forest preserve.
Mhm.
It's going to be a different environment. So that's why it still requires she's going to need practice in the
Mhm.
forest preserve or whatever other environments you would take her into. So we would teach all 6 of those commands and within that 2-week period, and then we apply them during the day. We do a lot of duration work, which is if we tell a dog not to move for 2 hours, they don't move for 2 hours. They'll just sit still. So that's a lot of mental work. They do get trained.
Really?
Mhm. They do get trained
Okay.
on the on the treadmill as a form of exercise as well. Doesn't mean that she'll need it, but she'll get that as well as an outlet here.
She'll understand what to do on a treadmill.
Correct. Now we use tethers and stuff to help keep the dog on the treadmill. It just makes it easier because if left to their own devices, like they'll just hop off. But once they get used to it, the dogs they all love going on the treadmill. So um, then we have the 3 and 4 week program. So 4 week, yes.
This 2 week do crating her, will she get crate trained?
Oh, so that's a good question. So I forgot about the crate training. So us crate training her here doesn't it is also something that you would have a hard time transferring to you. Okay.
Oh,
Because it's associated to us. So that's the con to board and trains, is that all the training is associated to us.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Of
So that's why
course.
we have to transfer. Okay. Now, what can happen with the kennel is, and we would figure this out, is there's a thing that's called a bark collar. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's similar to an e-collar, except it's whenever the dog barks, it automatically corrects them. It's the same technology. But whenever we get dogs that have kennel issues, we correct them with the e-collar. We teach them and all that, crate train them and all that stuff. We feed them in the kennel, create positives with the kennel. But at the same time, if the dog is throwing a fit in the kennel, we have to correct it. So we correct it. The dogs are fine, but we may use a bark collar for, like, let's say overnight or something, because since they're there for sleeping for 8 hours or whatever overnight, sometimes the dogs will get anxious and they'll try to break out the kennel. So the bark collar kind of tricks them into thinking that they'll be corrected. So then it helps keep them calm in the kennel.
And in
Okay.
your experience, they never like glitch out and buzz when they're not supposed to?
It can happen, but that's why we remove everything. Like you can't have metal bowls or pails in the kennel because of the sound. If it dings, if they were to kind of clank against the metal pail or something, it would set off the bark collar, right? So we remove everything other than the dog with the bark collar. Everything else would be removed. There would be no pail, no water bowl or anything like that, so it doesn't accidentally set off.
And like another dog barks doesn't set it off?
It could, but if you put enough space between them, no, because it has to be an immediate like vibration.
I understand, yeah.
Yeah. No, but if we have a dog that's got a bark collar on, we separate them
Okay.
so that we don't get that. Yeah. So to give you an example, we had a dog that we did a board and train with for a rescue like a year or so ago, and he had really, really bad separation anxiety. Like you put him in the kennel and you would think he was dying. It was really bad. So I was able to get it done within 24 to 48 hours of him being at my facility, but then he absolutely needed to have a bark collar. And you could tell if you put him in the kennel without the bark collar, he'd start looking at the cage, he'd start kind of trying to gnaw at it, which was like 90% better than what it was. But if left unaddressed, he would escalate. But when we put him with the bark collar, he would just go in, turn around into a little donut and go to sleep.
Because he feels the collar and knows what would happen?
Correct.
So how long does that end up having to happen at home if we?
Depends on the dog. For some dogs, it could be lifelong. For some dogs, it could be a few months. Some dogs, it's an instant turnaround, because the biggest factor is your relationship with your dog.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. With us, we train the dog. We don't have any emotional attachment. We're not buddies with the dog. We're there to train them. Right. So what actually creates that kind of, what creates a lot of issues in the kennel is people give the dogs too much freedom. They typically coddle or give the dog too much affection. There's no real formal rules or boundaries. So then when they try to put him in the kennel, the dog throws a fit.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's based off of that relationship. So for us, because day one, when your dog gets dropped off, it's going to start training, it's going to start getting discipline, it's going to start being told what to do and made to do it. It's going to be a lot of structure that for us, like right off the bat, like that one dog, that dog was really bad. And within, 1 to 2 days, I was able to cut the separation anxiety, but the collar had to be there because it was so intense that if without it, he would escalate.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay. And the reason, and to explain why that is, because people always ask, like, well, if the training is so good, why do we need to have these tools after the training.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you guys drive?
Mm-hmm.
Do you go on the expressway?
Yep.
Do you go the speed limit?
Nope.
Right.
Oh, I do.
She does.
So you're a
He
rule
doesn't.
follower.
I am.
Yeah.
Tell me what to do.
Most people do not go the speed limit, right? And the reason is because you can get away with it, right? So, but if you see the squad car, what happens?
Yeah, slow down.
No, because now there's threat of consequence. So think of it's called opportunistic behavior. All animals do it. It's part of survival instinct. So think of the e-collar as a cop on a collar,
Mhm.
or the bar collar, cop on a collar, right? So when it's present, the dog's gonna behave themselves, and then when you remove it, the dog's gonna, of course, press boundaries and things. So because people ask, like, well, if I'm always going to use it, is the dog always going to be wearing it? And go, no. I'm like, only when you're going to need it. So like if your dog were to be in the kennel and you're going to leave for 4 hours, you'd need that bar collar, right? Let's say she's gonna be off leash and go for a walk, or go to a restaurant patio or something. Since you're going to be outside, there's going to be stimuli, there's going to be cars and things that would trigger her reactivity. You would have your e-collar, right? So then it's present, and in response to the presence, the dog goes, oh, okay, the cop is here, so I'm going to behave myself, right? But then if you remove it, the dog's going to, like with people, they're going to.
And so, in your experience, is it kind of like some dogs end up under just not needing it anymore, or most of the dogs who are trained this way, it goes like you just described, that there are circumstances where you have to have it?
Any way that you train your dog, you will always need the motivator. Okay. If you're using food, you're going to always need the motivator. If you're using aversives or negatives, you're going to always need a motivator. Okay.
Huh.
Because dogs aren't like humans. Okay. So you could go and hire someone to teach you to play piano proactively, and then turn around and tell yourself, I'm going to practice every day for 15 minutes. Right. And do the homework and all that stuff. You can make that proactive decision. Dogs don't do that. Dogs don't turn around and say, oh, you taught me how to walk nicely at your side without being reactive. I'm going to do that now. Okay. Dogs are reactive. They go out in that walk and she goes, oh, you don't have that collar on? What happens if I bark at this car? Right. And if there's no consequence, she goes, oh, so you're telling me if that collar's not on, I don't have to heel, and I don't have to stop what I'm doing, and I don't have to return. You're going to get that in response.
So
Okay?
the likelihood is that she will be wearing that collar when we go out after this.
Yes. Any training tool that you use, gentle leader, prong collar, remote collar, or food and clicker and stuff. And it's funny because in the dog training world, you have the positive only, then you have the balance trainers like myself, right? And they're always kind of going against each other.
Yeah.
Positive trainers will say, oh, well, that dog only did it because it has an e-collar on, right? But then trainers like ourselves go like, well, your dog only did it because you had treats.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we've read the back and forth. Yeah.
The difference is, if a dog ran away in response to a firework, they're not going to care about chicken. But
right.
with the e-collar, I can make them return. That's the thing, is even in an emergency situation, I still have a means of control. And that's what I account for the things that people typically don't account for. Right. So like, let's say you go down the forest preserve and you're like, oh, like, it's a nice day out. Like, we should be fine. There's not going to be any people out there. And then there's like a deer, and she sees a deer and she just kicks into prey drive. Now you got to override prey drive, but you don't have.
Right. And so the only concern, I mean, not the only concern, but the concern that's been in my mind about this when reading that then when the dogs don't have it, they might be aware that policeman isn't there, is like, I'm sure the circumstance will happen to us because a lot of what we do is go in the wilderness hiking or camping. I'm sure the circumstance will happen that we lose it. Is it likely then that she would be like, oh my God, free for all? Or is that unlikely? Or you just don't know? It just depends on the dog.
It depends on the dog, but also like the other day, someone went out with their dog and their collar wasn't on. Like it was on, but it wasn't turned on. And their dog listened as if it was on. Does it make sense?
Well,
So
yeah, it was physically present, but then
right,
if
let's say she's got the collar and you lose the remote, right, on that hike.
Yeah,
now
it's going to happen.
Yeah. let's say she tries something, right? And you don't correct it. And there's other means of correction, but let's say you don't correct it with the collar. If she goes, oh, nothing happened there, and you let her continue to press things, she's gonna go, right? But there are other means of correction
Okay.
in case something happened. Um, but they come with the lanyard, they come with clips and stuff. You can put a carabiner on them so you can clip them to your jeans and all that.
I will lose it.
And you can also have more than one.
Yeah, that's happening. Yeah. But that's interesting. So it sounds like this really means a kind of commitment to the presence of that in her life.
When they need
I
it,
see.
right? So when you're going to be hiking, and the battery lasts a long time. You know, so if you go for like 2 days of the 4-hour hiking or whatever each day, like you would be fine. Like you wouldn't need to charge it.
Or you could bring like a solar charger or whatever.
Yeah, you could bring if you have some, because they have like, it's like a cell phone, like a rechargeable lithium battery.
Yeah, like a
Exactly,
block, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful.
Other questions?
So getting back to crate training just for a second. So, in terms of doing your program and bringing her home and then trying to crate train her, I mean, does anything transfer? I mean, how?
Oh yeah. So what we started doing is, if you did 2 weeks, for example, at the end of the first week, or once we teach her all those commands, we film everything. Okay, we film the first session of every command that we teach with your dog. Okay, the sit, the stay, the down, the come, the place, the heel, and we make a video. It's usually about an hour to hour and a half, and then we send it to you. Okay, so you can watch it, and you can and the trainer is training your dog and explaining everything as if they were training you in person. Okay, so you see everything happening with your dog. And then, depending on how you do it, you can either come in at the end of a week to do a follow-up set, or a kind of transfer session. And you would come in already with some wealth of knowledge to practice hands-on. Okay. At the end of the second week, we make another video, which we call the overview. And we show you everything. So you see the difference of how your dog advanced from the very first week where they knew nothing to the end of the second week where they've had 2 weeks of practice. Okay, and we send that to you. And typically what people do is they watch those videos. They might have like an hour or so, session with us, and then they do their own thing. And then they come back, 2 weeks later, a week later, a month later, and they go, hey, I'm having trouble with these things still. And then they come in and we just focus on those things, right? So you'll have, and you'll see, like, we'll make a note, like we got to do a kennel video or whatever, so you can understand the exercise. But chances are, if she ends up needing a bark collar, the bark collar does all the work for you. It's literally just put her in the kennel, you put a bark collar on, you close it. There shouldn't be a problem. Okay, but we would.
And you leave for the evening, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah, because she's going to think that the collar itself is going to correct her, and that's what keeps her.
And it would correct her if she.
Yeah, if she barked or something, she cried or whined, it would correct her.
And what would be the possibilities with a 3-week program?
The 3-week, think of it, it's all the same stuff. So think of the 2-week is we get her like 50 to 60% there. Think of the 3-week as like we get to 60 to 70% like towards off-leash reliability, and think of the 4-week as kind of like she's 90%, 95% close to off-leash reliability. Okay, because remember, the recall, you always have to do some level of work to transfer everything to you, right? Because dogs aren't like a car where you can take the car in and say like, hey,
Okay.
stuff, right? There has to be some work involved, and you also want to bear in mind that because we're trainers, we have no problem going to the extent needed to make the dog comply. Okay, so what can happen is, like, let's say, and I don't know, this is just for example, we find we need to go to like 65 out of 127 for your dog to listen. Okay, because you're logical and because there's emotional attachment and we don't want to like hurt our dog or anything, people go like, man, 65, that's really high, right? So then they go lower. but the dog needs 65. And then when they come back and they're like, yeah, we're struggling, the dog won't listen. I'm like,
They
well,
just
what's your
don't
number?
want to do it. Yeah.
They're like, oh, I'm at 35. I'm like, well, 35 is not 65.
It's not
That's
for your
too late.
dog. So, go ahead.
So on the recall, let's say whether, we did like 3 weeks or 4 weeks.
Mhm.
So that leaves a training for us, some training for us in any event.
Mhm.
How does one do that, like, in a safe space, if you will, right? So
What you would do is you would go about like what you would normally do, but you would have her on a long line.
Mhm.
Okay. So you wouldn't go full blown like no leash, we're going to the forest preserve, right? You could have a 10-foot, 20-foot, 30-foot line. And this is actually how we train dogs to be off leash is we start on a short leash, we transfer to a long leash, and then we let the long leash drag, right? So the dog thinks there is no leash because it's on the ground. But we see it and we're near it so that if we give them a command and they make the choice to run or something, we can stop them by stepping on the leash, right? So you would just go and you would do what you would normally do, go hiking or whatever, and she would just have this long leash dragging, and you would just let her be a dog. And then when you're ready to practice that recall from a squirrel, you're just going to position yourself so that you're next to the leash, do everything that we would have taught you. And if it doesn't go like it's supposed to, you just step on the leash, and then it limits her response or her range so that you can make her return so that she's like, okay, like just so like over at Jesse's house, like or place, I have to do it. It's the same thing with you guys. Okay. So it's actually pretty simple because she'll know the skills. It's just you have to practice the skills with her so she knows they also apply to you.
Yep. Yeah.
If we went for one of the longer programs, like 3 weeks, because we do like think that she's going to be a little difficult with the recall and the off leash, is it possible that if there's something that she really wants to do that's good for her, we could ask you to add an additional command like fetch, or do you only do your 6?
So no, we take more stuff as long as it's feasible, right? So like let's say fetch. If there's no retrieving, like if she has no retrieve or no
Oh no,
interest,
she does. Yeah, that we work on it with her.
okay, yeah, then that's doable.
Mm-hmm.
The fetch, the way we would teach it, it wouldn't be. I mean, it depends because whenever I think of anything, I always think about 100% reliability, right?
Yeah.
Is the fetch is I throw the ball, she's gonna get it, she's gonna bring it back for sure,
Right.
right? Is we don't put remote behind that. We use food to train that, so it
Great.
wouldn't be a 100% reliable fetch.
Understood.
But if she like maybe doesn't return it or anything like that is something that we could work on. But if she just has no interest in returning it, it's not something that we would force with pressure.
So we would be interested in discussing with you a couple of 1 or 2 of such additional things
Sure.
than what you would normally do. Okay.
What fetch would be one? I'm assuming.
Oh yeah. So fetch would be one,
Okay.
and so this dog is really interested in like, so one of the things people do with this breed is they have it like, instead of throwing an item, you tell it to go get something by name, and it chooses, and it brings it back like a farm tool.
Oh, sure.
And that's a very common thing for people to do to keep this dog interested. It wants to be working, it wants to be engaged. So we have been able to get her to fetch and do a lot of different agility things on command,
Mhm.
but we have no ability to like tell her to bring something to us. Have you ever trained that?
Only when the dog has already had the instinct. Like the dog was already a mouthy dog. So for instance, do you follow us on social media at all?
Not yet.
Not yet.
No. So one of my trainers, Maddie, she currently has a service dog that she's training. And this is something that she's just doing on her own time. And the dog that she has, Tango, is a golden retriever / yellow lab mix. And it was bred into that dog to want to have something in its mouth. because it's going to be a service dog. So if the dog needs to pick up keys, or if the dog needs to pick up like a wallet or something, the dog is very mouth driven, that it makes it very easy for them to teach the dog to pick up things and bring them back. Okay. So if there's a fetch already, like there's a, like if I throw this, she'll go get it. There's a possibility that we could kind of harness that and shape it into like, you know, grabbing keys or something like that.
Yeah,
But
we'd be
that would,
super interested in that if
yeah.
you see that in her. I mean, I see that in her, but I you know, I don't know to what extent it needs
Yeah,
to be.
it just depends on the dog. I mean, there's ways of training it. Like we have what we call a flirt pole, which is it's a long kind of stick with a like a leather line on it. That's at the end of it, there's like a ball, or there's like a furry little squirrel or whatever, and we move the squirrel around, and the dog wants to pursue it. Right, so we take prey drive. They're pursuing it, thinking it's a rabbit or something, and then they grab it with their mouth. And it's possible we could use something like that to teach her, like, you know, we cue the word or something, get her to recognize the object, and try to transfer that to other objects. Okay.
That'll be the best thing ever.
But it would be, again, it's because obedience I'm not worried about, because I can put e-collar behind it, and that's what makes me able to, even if a dog has no food drive, or if the dog is like super stubborn and doesn't want to do anything, we can make it happen because of pressure.
Sure, I understand.
Yeah, so those would be like, it's like a variable, but yeah, I mean, it's easy enough that shouldn't be a problem.
That would be interesting for us to do a longer one if that could be part of it.
Sure. What we would most likely do is test it out in the beginning, see how she does, and then say like, okay, you know, we're going to see if we can, because we'd have to build it from the beginning, right? If it's like, okay, we'll start this on week 4, like it's very unlikely we're actually going to make it happen. We would start immediately, because we're going to need as much time as possible to try to shape it if we can.
Great.
Okay.
So interesting.
Other questions?
Would you want us to show you the few things that she does do when we come, so that you're aware like of what she's used to, or do you just not need that?
No, it's fine. You know, if you want to do like a video and like send that.
Oh yeah, great, of course.
Yeah.
Great idea.
Because I have a consult right after you. Other questions?
So we wanted to start this, so we wanted to drive back to Chicago on Saturday. It takes one full day to drive. Is it possible we could bring her Sunday?
I believe so, because we have 2 boarding trains now. We only take 4 at a time.
Because we don't have a apartment for her in Chicago, so we would come the night before we bring her to you.
Sure.
Or the night we bring her to you, we would get there.
Yeah. So we have 2 currently. So we do have, you know, the 3rd and 4th spot, because I know we have a daycare train. They were supposed to have started this past week, but the gentleman got in a car accident. So his dog's not starting till Monday. So we should be good. You would just talk to Maria. She'll get all that coordinated.
Okay.
What you would need to bring is just food, blanket, and then if there were an object you wanted her to retrieve or something, it'd be best if you brought something, so that this way when we give her back to you, if you were able to kind of harness that and train it, it's already something that's familiar.
And don't we bring our crate, or do you use yours?
No, we have our own bowls, our own water pails, our own crates and stuff. So you would just need bring your dog, leash, food, blanket, maybe an object or 2 that you want to use for her training, and then
I understand that we have to buy the correct e-collar.
Correct.
Do you want to like look at her to decide what size, or
how big, how much does she weigh?
30?
Yeah, between 20, sometimes 25 and 30.
Yes, she is.
Okay, so he looks to have like a moderate kind of thick fur.
Yeah, it's a double coat.
Double coat.
Yeah, so we'll probably need to get an adapter. I wouldn't worry about that in the beginning. We have our own at the facility, and then once we find something that works in terms of connectivity, because the one con to e-collar is, because dogs have that coat, it acts as a buffer, because there's 2 probes that need to make contact with the neck. So if that fur is very thick, it can be inconsistent.
Sure.
So there's special adapters that they make so that you can get as consistent of a contact as possible. Okay, so the collar you would need, you technically have two options. One is meant for 70 pounds and under, one is meant for 70 pounds and over. Okay, the only reason why I suggest the second option is the first one is like a big square, so it's kind of bulky. And with the 70 and over one, it's curved and it's not as kind of noticeable. So it's kind of like just personal preference. The other thing is with the dog with a denser coat, because of that connectivity issue, when you have more output, it's easier to create contact. Okay, so taking that into consideration.
It's such a big weight difference though, like more
Yeah,
than twice her weight.
But you can just adjust the level.
yeah.
Right?
So the difference would be on the smaller one or the 70 pounds and under one. Let's say the dog's number was 60, and on the 70 pounds and over one, the dog's number would be like 40. Right? It's because since it's more output, the numbers are just lower. So I could use it on my Chihuahua, like, and he's 8 pounds. It would just be.
Oh, okay. It just, you need that for the higher, but you can also use it for the lower.
Yeah. You know, and I'm
Got
only
it.
saying that because of the density of the coat.
Okay.
You know, if you had a short-haired dog, I would say, yeah, you'd be fine with the 70 pound and under because I wouldn't worry about connectivity issues.
Can we pick it up reliably somewhere in Chicago, like the day we get there, or should we order on Amazon?
Those you order online, you can order directly through Dogtra, and we'd send you the make and model.
Yeah.
And then if you don't have it by Saturday or Sunday, it doesn't matter because we have our own that we can use. And then, you know, as long as you have it by the time you're going to do your pickup, you're fine.
Oh, I see. I
Okay.
thought we had to arrive with it.
No, we have several of our own, so that's
Okay.
not a problem. If you bring your own, that's ideal because then we can just label it and then work with your dog. Because
Yeah,
when
so we can ask Maria where to order it from, the best place to order it from.
oh, you can also ship it to us.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
My,
let's do
my
that.
girlfriend's a genius. She's whispering,
Great.
just ship it to the facility.
Good idea. Good idea. Yeah, because it'll be a couple days late.
Yeah, that's fine. But we have ours that we can work it with in the meantime, and you can just have it shipped to us. We also have had people like ship their dog's food to us and stuff. You know, like because they'll go out of town and sometimes like they won't bring enough food, so they'll just like order on Chewy and just deliver it to the facility. So
Okay.
Would you like us to decide on the length of stay now, or would you like to do it after you understand what she's like?
no, that's so. If it was just obedience, I wouldn't care because I know what I can get done within a time frame. If it's the with the fetch and the more specific like object thing, that one more sooner rather than later because it tells us how much like how to like uh, how much time to focus on things.
Mhm.
You know, because the other stuff we do every day, all day, we know what we can get done. But the other one is more specific. So then, you know, if I'm like, okay, the dog's really good with this stuff, then I can put more time into this new
Great.
thing, right? So, but you'd be like within the, in terms of obedience, you're in the 2 to 4 week range. Just depends on how close to 100% do you want her by the time you get her back.
I am. Okay.
Right?
Okay.
But it's really just personal preference, and you can always do 2 weeks. And if you're like, oh, this is great, and we'd like to bring her back, for another week or something, like that's perfectly fine. It's just the special stuff that you need that is where we kind of need more of an idea of how much time we have.
Okay. All right. So we'll talk about it.
Yeah. Other questions?
No, I guess the next step really is to talk to Maria and figure out what time we can bring her in.
Correct.
And all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah. Ideally, when you drop them off, you'll want to drop her off earlier because then we get the day to start working with the dog. Because if she gets dropped off at night, we have to worry about that crate issue.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, maybe like Sunday. I mean, it depends on what your schedule. Like Sundays is Sunday, right? I mean, we could drop her off Sunday morning if that works for you.
Yeah, that works just fine. Yeah.
Okay.
It's just so we have time to get her acclimated, during that day and start prepping for the evening and stuff, in anticipation of the kennel issues.
Great. Okay. Do you
Otherwise,
have any other questions?
No, the only other thing would be, there's someone on premise, 24/7, because people always wonder, if the dogs are left unattended overnight or anything like that. We have someone at the facility 24/7, so that's not a problem.
What else do people ask that we forgot to ask you?
The only other thing would be what an actual e-collar is, like the sensation.
No, I tried it on myself.
Right, I've tried it on myself.
I've tried it on her.
Uh-huh.
I don't trust myself because we've been struggling for a while. So I tried it on her, and it seems to be like she will respond to it very well.
Okay. What happened? What did you end up? What kind of collar was it?
It was I think it was called Pet Care.
Oh yeah, those are garbage.
Yeah.
But she still even responded to garbage, so she'll be great with you.
Yeah, well, she'll be even better with a professional grade collar. The ones that I recommended, they run about 287-ish to 325-ish with tax.
We saw.
Yeah, but they last for years.
Okay.
The other ones tend to give out. So, and also how the stem comes across is very different. Okay, so they're pricier, but they're worth the investment. I've had mine for 8 years.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Oh yeah, so they'll last a long time. The most common thing that we see is the battery, gives out because it's a rechargeable lithium battery, much like your cell phone. So like after a few years, they won't hold a charge, or like they'll only hold a charge for 30 minutes. So then, just go to Dog Trail, you can find the battery that you need, $15-20. You can purchase it, or sometimes you can send it in and they'll replace the battery for you and send it back. But that's the most common issue that I see with the collars, is that the battery does give after a few years.
I thought of another question. Super affectionate breed.
Mm-hmm.
Do you let them be affectionate with you, or will she be denied any possibility of cuddling or kissing or anything like that?
We don't. I'm sure some of my staff will from time to time, when I'm not looking.
She's irresistible.
It's like, it's not like with you guys. We do positive reinforcement. We do use food. We do use praise.
That doesn't make them sad or something if they can't be affectionate?
Because they're not aware of that.
Okay.
Yeah, dogs don't need affection.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the human component.
They do it, but they totally don't need it.
Right. It's not in their genetic code of like, I need affection to survive.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're not trying to create a robot or anything like that. We want the dog to, of course, be a dog, but we want that obedience to be reliable.
Yes.
So if we say something, you got to do it. So if my mom said wash the dishes, I wash the dishes. That was not an option, right? And that's the same thing with obedience, because if your dog is taking off towards the street and you say recall and you say come, like, do you want that to be an option?
No. Right? I understand.
Yeah.
We want that. We want that.
But yeah, I don't think there shouldn't be any issues or anything like that. We'd let you know if anything comes up. But Maria will take care of the scheduling and all that stuff. And then if you don't have your collar by the time you drop her off, not a big deal.
Thank you.
We have some that we have our own to start her off with, and then whenever hers gets in, you can either order it to us or have it delivered to us. You're also welcome to come visit your dog. So let's say you're missing her or whatever, and you want to just have a little visit or whatever. You just let us know, and we could put you like in the puppy room. You can spend some time with her, but it would just be time to like, just like see her and all that, make sure she's doing well. Because I've had clients in the past who came in before the first lesson, and they were like trying to do training with the dog, and they're like, the dog's not doing it. I'm like, because we've not done anything with you yet. We have to have that transfer session before the dog will start listening. So in case you show up and you're like, hey, what'd you learn? Sit, stay, down, come, right? All that stuff. And she's like looking at you, it's because it's us that's training the dog, right? So that's tied to us. So once we transfer it to you and you can start actively working with her, then you'll start to see what she knows.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anything
really
else?
Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.
We're looking forward to it.
All right. So if you need anything else, you let us know. Otherwise, Maria will get in contact with you, and then we'll see you soon. Okay.
Okay. See you this weekend.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.